Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to do something just a little bit different. We are slowing things down to unpack a truly fascinating, deeply metaphorical text called Deep Calls Deep. If you're someone who values really efficient, focused learning, you already know that sometimes the absolute best strategic insights don't come from a textbook, and they definitely don't come from a spreadsheet. Sometimes they're actually distilled into poetry. So let's see if we can bridge that gap together today. We're going to take these contemplative metaphors and figure out the concrete strategic philosophy hidden right inside them. The piece kicks off with this incredible, punchy opening hook. Thoughts that are deep-seated make the world go round. I mean, that is a bold claim, isn't it? We're so used to hearing that money makes the world go round, or maybe power, or, technology. But this text immediately forces us to pivot. It argues that the real engine of the world, the actual driving force, is profound, foundational thinking. It totally sets the stage for what we're doing today, moving away from all those surface-level distractions and getting into the kind of deep thinking that literally drives global change. Now, to truly understand the weight of these words, we absolutely have to talk about the mind behind them. This isn't just some abstract poem written in a vacuum. It is the deeply personal philosophy of Oluyomi Oladevid. She's a policy influencer, a top-tier strategist, and someone who is heavily invested in bringing clarity to incredibly complex situations. Shifting from that poetic opening to the actual strategic mind behind the words gives us the exact lens we need to decode the rest of this text. Okay, let's dive into this because understanding her background completely frames everything we're about to explore. Oluyomi describes herself as proudly Nigerian with just a massive love for people. Her professional focus is definitely heavy-hitting. We're talking global development, transformation, generating real solutions, and influencing policy. But driving all of that outward action is a very clear internal compass. She's firmly grounded in her faith. She states that her Father God owns and rules the universe, and she actually describes him as the wheel within my wheels. So these verses we're looking at, they are definitely not just random musings. They are the core worldview of a seasoned policy influencer who actually relies on a higher power for her ultimate strategy. And that brings us straight to the first major theme of her text: building strong foundations. Think about it. When you are in the business of global transformation, you simply cannot build on sand. The text explicitly states buildings that are worthy of note lean on the rocky foundation. We live in a world that is completely obsessed with quick fixes and overnight success, right? But this is a direct call for structural integrity. A building that's actually worthy of note requires the hard, totally unglamorous work of digging down and finding solid rock. It is a massive challenge to superficial Band-Aid solutions. And this brilliantly illustrates her next point. Trees that yield fruit all year long choose streams of life. Pay attention to the active verb there, choose. Trees don't just magically happen to find water. In this metaphor, they are actively selecting their source. If you want sustainable year-round transformation, if you want that fruit, you have to be incredibly intentional about where you're drawing your nutrients, your energy, and your inspiration from. You have to actively tap into a reliable, life-giving stream. That level of intentionality leads us perfectly into our second theme, navigating the narrow way. Because once you actually have that solid foundation built, how do you find your direction in such a chaotic, complex world? Well, Oluyomi writes, narrow way that leads to life is just. The path that leads to true life and genuine impact. It is rarely the wide, super easy highway. It requires intense, laser-like focus. But the crucial part here is that she equates this narrow path with being just. Doing the right thing, true justice, often demands that we choose the much more difficult, highly principled route. Then, out of nowhere, she throws in this fantastic, slightly humorous modern twist. She says, sheep that keep fit stick with the GPS. Traditionally, sheep just blindly follow a shepherd. But here, they're relying on a GPS to stay on track and keep fit. If we relate this back to her bio for a second, we remember she considers God the wheel within my wheels. Her faith is her GPS. To stay strategically fit and avoid wandering off that narrow, just path, you literally have to stay glued to your ultimate guiding system. Now we arrive at the third, and honestly, perhaps the most absolutely crucial theme: truth over shallow knowledge. We are all living in the information age, but let's be real, not all knowledge is created equal. Now, what's really interesting about this contrast is how viscerally she frames it. On one hand, you have knowledge empty of truth, which she bluntly says stinks in shallow ponds. It's stagnant, it's useless. Think about raw data without any context, or facts that are manipulated just to hide reality. But then compare that to thoughts that are deep-seated. Deep truth flows freely. It's such a brilliant, vivid reminder that our goal has to be pursuing actual truth, not just stockpiling empty, useless facts. So, how do we practically find this deep truth? How do we actually generate the kinds of solutions Oluyomi talks about? Well, the text wraps up with a few striking metaphors that give us some incredibly practical direction for our day-to-day lives. She writes, "History is a compass. Little ant has great lessons." These are two vastly different scales of observation, right? First, you have the macro scale, history. Looking backward gives us our bearings. It's the compass that literally prevents us from repeating the same old failures in our future strategies. And then you have the micro scale, the little ant. Observing even the smallest, most seemingly insignificant creatures can give us massive strategic insights about things like teamwork, preparation, and sheer resilience. True wisdom means we have to study both the grand sweep of time and the tiny little details right beneath our feet. And the core of all this is perfectly captured in her final statement. Gratitude is always learning. This isn't just about politely saying thank you. It's an entire posture of the mind. A grateful person is a humble person, and a humble person is always open to being taught, whether that lesson comes from a massive historical event, a tiny little ant, or a deeply seated thought. This is the ultimate takeaway for your continuous personal and professional development. If you really want to influence policy and transform the globe, you have to maintain that grateful, sponge-like mindset of a lifelong learner. Which brings us to the very end of this explainer, and I want to leave you with a question that you really have to ask yourself. Based on Oluyomi Ola David's profound framework, are you building your strategies, and frankly your life, on a rocky foundation? Or are you just drinking from a shallow, stagnant pond of empty knowledge? It's a challenging thought for sure, but as we've learned today, it's those deep-seated thoughts that truly make the world go round. So keep learning, keep seeking out those deep streams, and we'll see you next time.